All right, so today we're still in chapter 12, section 4 of the notes. We will be covering more of the Protestant Reformation. We're discussing how that looked at the time and different groups during the time. We finished up with Bloody Mary the other day, right? She was trying to get it to go more Catholic, but the way that she went about it actually forced people against it. So more against the Catholic Church, and it actually went more Protestant. So today we're going to be starting with the Anabaptists. The Anabaptists, all right? So just kind of follow along, be ready to roll. Many of the Protestant reformers allowed state government to play an important role in the church. You can underline that. The church, and we've talked about this before, the church and government were really arm in arm, hand in hand. They worked together to have power and to control people. And so we did see that even after these Protestant churches broke off from the Catholic Church, they still allowed the church the government to play a role in church affairs. All right, you can have that underlined. Some people were against the state having any kind of power in the church. All right, and they were called Anabaptists. All right. So we see a group of people that is like, look, we're breaking off from the Catholic Church, but we also don't want the government to have any say in what we do. Does that make sense? All right. When you think about our country today, the government really does not have a say in church functions. Correct? All right. The government can't tell us what religion to be. In our country, I'm speaking about, can't tell us what religion to be. Can't tell us how we practice our faith or your faith. As long as it's not infringing on someone else's rights or hurting somebody, you can pretty much do whatever you want to practice your faith. Pray, sing, dance, throw flags, kneel, whatever you want. Help the poor, don't help the poor, whatever you want. The government really doesn't step in. They're not allowed to based on our Constitution, all right? So pretty similar to that, where we see the Anabaptists, these people saying, we don't want you involved at all. All right, so according to the Anabaptists, the true Christian church was a voluntary community of adult believers. Believers were first reborn spiritually, then baptized. You can underline that. So that's interesting, that when you think about the Catholic Church baptizes babies, right? Like they dump the water on their heads and they bless them, and that's basically the way that they accept them into the church. And the Catholic teaching would be that that's absolving them from what they call original sin. But the Anabaptists, or these Protestant faiths, began thinking that an adult should be the person that's choosing to be baptized. Do they want to be baptized? So kind of believing in the faith, believing in it, and then being baptized. All right. So Anabaptists from Catholics and Anabaptists from Catholics and also other Protestants who baptized infants were a little bit different. Anabaptists based many of their beliefs and practices on the accounts of the early Christian church in the New Testament. So if you read the Bible, remember when we talked about Martin Luther believed that's where you get your facts from, the Bible. And the people who were being baptized in the Bible were adults. All right, they were going to the rivers and they were being baptized. Jesus in the Bible is a grown man, 30 years old when he's baptized. Okay? So that's where they're getting this idea from. They believe that all Christians were equal. All right? Each Anabaptist church chose its own minister. Because all Christians were considered priests, any member in the community would be eligible to be a minister. All right? So it wasn't like it was some secret society that allowed you to be the minister. Does that make sense? All right. If enough of the people agreed that you were good at in your position, you were a good person, you followed the faith, then you were chosen as the minister. You could be chosen as the minister. Most Anabaptists, you can underline this, believed in complete separation of church and state. Complete separation. They believed that the government should be kept out of the churches. They even thought that the government should have no authority over Christians. They believe that the government should have no authority over real Christians, meaning none. They can't arrest us. They can't do anything to us. I don't have to listen to the laws if I'm a real Christian. Do you see how the government might not like that? Do you see how the government might say, if they think we shouldn't have power over them or the right to have authority, then what might they try to do? Right? They might try to uprise. They might try to go against us. They might try to do things that they're not supposed to do if they truly have this belief that the government holds no authority over them. All right? Anabaptists, the flip side to that is pretty interesting because not only did they not think that the government should have authority over them, they didn't involve themselves in government. So it's not like they were saying, well, the government can't have authority over us, but we want to be in the government and have authority over other people. They basically cut themselves off from government, all right? And you can underline that. They refused to hold political office. They would never run for political office. They would not want to be in politics. And they refused to bear arms, meaning have guns, firearms. So two pretty important things. It's not like they were trying to form an uprising against the government. They just didn't want to have anything to do with it. They didn't want them involving with them, and they didn't want to involve themselves with it. They didn't even want to have weapons. So they were pretty pacifist, meaning peaceful. Does that make sense? All right, so, as somebody looking from the outside, you would probably go, well, leave them alone, right? They're not bothering you, leave them alone. But their political and religious beliefs called them to be regarded as, listen to this, dangerous radicals. What about them sounds dangerous? Anything? No, right? A lot of shaking heads, right? No, they don't want to have guns, and they don't want to be involved in government. They don't want the government to really have power over them. Not really dangerous, but both the Catholic Church and the government saw them as dangerous because they didn't want the government to have any authority, and they didn't want to be part of the church. And so they didn't want a lot of people joining into this thought process. Got it? All right, so that's what made them dangerous radicals. Not that they were burning down churches or storming, government buildings or killing, people. It's that they didn't want to give authority to anyone. All right? And the thought was, could they, if enough people joined into that movement, could they, by kind of, just mere deference, just mere numbers, hold a lot of power, right? A lot of power, a lot of people equals a lot of power. Even if they don't act on that power, it can get very scary if there's a large number of people supporting a certain cause that goes against the government, let's say. Does that make sense? Even if they're not threatening the government, even if they're not scared, the government might look at that and go, but what if they decide to threaten us, right? If we allow them to be considered safe and okay, and we don't speak out against them, what if they do get really big and decide to come after us? Does that make sense? Shake heads, nothing. Any questions about that? Pretty simple, right? All right. The only thing that most Protestants and Catholics could agree on was that they needed to persecute the Anabaptists. So think about that, right? Here we are again. It's this group that's really not bothering anybody, but the two big groups at the time, Protestants and Catholics, looked at the Anabaptists, who were also Protestant, and said, what? Yeah, we both don't like you. Like, we both kind of have a problem with you. So it's, again, it's kind of interesting. All right, I'm going to jump down to the effects on the roles of women. I think I can get through that. Protestants developed a new view of the family. They did not believe that there was anything especially holy about being celibate, meaning not being married, not having sex, not having children. Remember, the Catholic Church, priests and nuns, they have no kids, they stay celibate, they don't marry. In the Protestant faith, they believe you should marry, you should have children, right? They did away with monasticism and the requirement of celibacy. Monasticism meaning not having anything to do with the concept of becoming married or having children. And they did away with the requirement of celibacy, meaning no sex for married couples. Marriage and family were now emphasized, so they wanted it. So that's a big change from Catholic faith to Protestant faith. They encourage their leaders to be married and have children. All right? But the role of women did not change very much. You should know that. It's not like because now Protestant faith supported families that all of a sudden, women started to gain more power yet, or more rights yet, okay? Women were still subordinate to men. You can underline that. Women were expected to bear children and obey their husbands. Being a wife and a mother was the only role that most Protestant women could play in society. Got it? All right, so not real difficult, not real, rocket science to, answer that. We'll start to see, at this point you did have women in power. We talked about a lot of women being in power at times, but just in normal everyday life, you didn't see women really gaining a lot of rights, privileges, powers that they should have had at the time. Does that make sense? Are there any questions about that? So if I ask you to compare and contrast, women or what family looked like under Protestant and Catholic faiths, you could. Pretty simple. Or maybe even compare it to today's standards in our society today. You should be able to do that at this point, all right? I think I will wrap it up there to keep the video not too long.